A privilege for me to be here to pay my tribute to the memory of Dr. Latha. I first met her in Pune when she had come to participate in a meeting on water resource management along with Professor M.K. Prasad, who is an old friend of mine, and Professor Prasad said, this is I think was 2007, that he would like to come over to my place. Anyway, he was invited for dinner along with Latha, and that is how I got to know her, learn about the River Research Center and their work. And only a little later, of course, our Western Ghat ecology expert panel was set up, and we initiated work of the panel in which obviously Latha played a key role, as I would come to. I would prefer if the photography is concluded within a minute or so, then I can concentrate on speaking. I cannot speak while these people are standing here flashing. Please be done in very quickly. Thank you. So as I said, the Western Ghat Ecology Expert Panel, on which Dr. Vijayan was my colleague, we had a great deal to do with Latha and the River Research Center and the Chalkudi River. I have been asked to speak on rivers of Western Ghats, which are plentiful, many more west flowing and relatively smaller number major rivers east flowing. I want to talk about my experiences with 4 of these rivers, and let me begin with Mutha, which is a part of the Krishna river basin. It is a tributary of Bhima, which is a major tributary of Krishna. And Pune, where I was born and raised, is just to the east of the crestline of the Western Ghats on the Deccan Plateau. On either banks of Mutha river, this city is settled. And of course, we took the river for granted. My house was not very far from the river, but Pune was not crowded then. So and the river was not polluted then, and I used to go along with friends to swim in the river when I was in school. We had seen some floods in the river, but on 11 July 1961, there was a flood unprecedented ever before and not followed ever again. That is because a newly constructed dam, the Panshet Reservoir, upstream of Mutha from Pune, broke, and all the water stored in Panshet, and then the lower down there was an older reservoir at Khadakwasla, so the Panshet flows broke Khadakwasla also. So from both these dams, all the water flew over and submerged a very large part of Pune city just by the river bank. Though fortunately, our house was a little further up, and that was a hilly area of Pune, so we were spared. But very large number of people suffered. The remarkable thing was that the Panshet Dam had broken at least 8 hours before the waters reached Pune. And nobody in Pune city had any warning that suddenly the waters are going to come and going to probably inundate a large proportion of the Pune city. And this included my girlfriend's father's hospital. It was situated right next to Sulatana, whom I married later. Her father's hospital was right next to the river, and with all its equipment and everything, and with the patients in the bed, suddenly the waters came. And people understood that certainly it has taken some time, and how was it that nobody was warned? And then we came to understand that the basic tenet of government machinery is not to impart any information to people. And for those 8 hours, apparently, there was discussion between All India radio station in Pune with their headquarters whether to give this news or not, and they never gave the news. And now the question was, of course, Pudekars were stunned. There was huge property damage, but fortunately waters reached Pune at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, so nobody died, though some good friends of mine spent several hours up some telephone poles and electric poles and so on. Why did the dam break? There were inquiries, judicial inquiries about what was happening, and things were suspicious. One of the magistrates conducting the inquiry apparently committed suicide by jumping from second floor of his bungalow. So there was something which Pudekars certainly were very unhappy about, something fishy going on. Nobody had any real final clue as to what happened. No satisfactory inquiry report was ever released. There were, of course, a lot of speculations in the newspapers, and 50 years later, in 2011, I was writing regularly columns in Marathi newspapers, so I thought I would write on the 50th anniversary of this event, and wanted to go back to the newspaper files where I was writing regularly. A Marathi newspaper, Sakal, which had in fact published a lot at that time. And so I went to the editor, and they had all the files arranged month by month from 1940 onwards. Interestingly enough, July 1961, he found out was the only file missing. So somebody had made sure that those files were also gone. In any case, 10 years later, the dam began to be constructed again, both Khadakwasla and Panshet, and I went to do some field work in the watershed, the submersion area in fact of what was Panshet Dam, which again got refilled a little later, and the hills upstream of the dam. Now the occasion was I had become interested in sacred forests, sacred grounds. They are like, you have Sarpakaus in Kerala or Nagarbanas in Karnataka, to some deity or other. These are parts of the forest which are dedicated, and they were the only remaining patches of natural vegetation in that area. So as a student of ecology, I became interested and undertook fieldwork for several months in 1971-72 in that area. And I stayed in villages which were part of the submerged area. Their lands near the river had been submerged once before the dam broke, and they were settled a little uphill in all that area. We talked to them. So what had happened? They said the whole experience of the construction of the dam, which had begun in 1955, and the dam, as I said, broke in 61, was quite a striking experience. Before that, the entire area, this is all hilly areas, was covered with two kinds of vegetation, some natural forest and then shifting cultivation lands. They were relatively poor peasants, but they had, each peasant had 20 acres, 30 acres, 40 acres, They had a long cycle, some 15-year cycle. They would cultivate few hectares a year, clear felling that, but never cutting down the mango and the myrobalan trees. Move on to another patch 3 years later, complete the cycle and come back. They said the whole area was then in 55 either natural forest or shifting cultivation areas with lot of mango and myrobalan trees left intact, big ones, and then some scrub following the shifting cultivation cycle. As the dam construction began, roads reached this area, and along with the roads came trucks, and for the first time, along with the trucks, engineers and timber merchants of Pune, and of course forest officials. Now they went around the villages, the forestry people, the engineers and the timber merchants, telling people, now you are going to have to leave. It would be foolish of you not to make some money at least out of these huge mango myrobalan trees which are on your land. And they persuaded them, they said, to sell those big trees for paltry sums. They said some big mango tree would be sold for 1.5 rupee and so on, at such princely sums. They said they didn't know what to do, and they were really completely unfamiliar with this modern civilization, and the whole area was cut down. On top of it, since the roads reached, the forestry officials also colluded with timber merchants, and the upper reaches which were under natural forest, they were also polished off. All that remained were the sacred grounds, because people would not allow them to be cut. So the whole area was reforested, and very interestingly, now there were few patches left here and there. When I went for the field work initially, a senior forest official of Maharashtra department I knew, he said, well, our guard will come to guide you. So just on the first trip of 7 days, I did not really know. I said, sure. So the guard came. The guard came, he would take us to the village, then he would disappear and reappear next morning. So I asked villagers what was he doing. He said he was negotiating with them for how much bribe they should pay for some encroachments they had done, and then of course demanding some good country chicken and liquor and sleeping there, so that next morning he will wake up and meet us. So the whole operation, which I am afraid is characteristic of that time and today, of a highly corrupted bureaucratic apparatus colluding in the destruction of nature along with these so-called development projects, really was, as I said, in 1971-72, brought vividly before my eyes. The next river I want to speak about is Bedti. Bedti is a river which originates again on the Western Ghats of Karnataka, somewhere in Dharwad district, and flows to the Arabian Sea. There was a project to dam Bedti river and generate electric power. In 1977, the Janata Dal government was elected, and there were some progressive politicians involved, and in particular there was a progressive member who was appointed to the planning commission. So he said that now we must bring in the system of environmental impact assessment of large projects. So this was the first time, as far as I understand, in 1978, that some environmental impact assessment started well before the Environment Protection Act and so on, in which environmental impact assessments became official, but this was the beginning. So there was this Bedti river hydroelectric project. At that time I was doing ecological fieldwork in the area where the Bedti river basin was, and I was inducted onto the environmental impact assessment committee. As I said, in 78, the Karnataka Power Corporation arranged for a vehicle to pick us up from Bengaluru, take us to Hubli, which is a town not too far from where the project was going to be. We stayed in the inspection bungalow night. Next morning, from Hubli, we were driven to the PWD bungalow at close to the dam, proposed dam site. The dam was yet to be constructed, of course. And we spent precisely 93 minutes around the dam site and came back to the guest house. And the chairman of the committee, Environmental Impact Assessment Committee, was a senior bureaucrat, said, well, let's write the report, and there is nothing to be worried about, let's clear the project. I said 93 minutes, and we have not asked anybody involved. A large amount of farmland, and not just farmland, along with there are these spice gardens in that area. Areca nut, pepper, cardamom are produced, which are valuable produce. So there is surely going to be substantial economic loss also. There should be some proper assessment of those losses. At 93 minutes of just walking around, this is quite inadequate. Now, as this discussion was going on, there was a very interesting incident. Opposite me, we were at the dining table, was sitting a gentleman, Mr. Kachua, I remember, an engineer from Rajasthan. For the first time he was saying, any tree taller than whatever, 13, 14 feet. These were quite large, some of them 70, 80 easily, with high trees there. And he was wearing a spotless white bush shirt, like my friend Vijayan here. And I noticed that in his armpit, a big red patch began to develop. So I looked at him and then looked at the ground. I thought it must be a leech which has bitten him and then given up after it was full. It must have fallen down. It was there. So I picked it up and said, sir, please notice, you go and put some turmeric or something. Obviously you have had a leech bite. So he looked at it, and poor fellow had no idea of leeches or any such thing. He was horrified, almost screamed, fainted practically. Then the attendants took him, and anyway, nothing much damage was done. Came back 15 minutes later, and he said, you mean to say that this forest, this so-called evergreen forest, is the habitat of such awful creatures as these leeches? And there are mad people who say that it should be preserved. Yes, I said, yes, I am afraid I am probably one of those mad people. But of course, as I said, the decision was promptly made that we should clear the project. I was the youngest member of the team. I was, 35-year-old. The others were, 60, some retired, minimum of 55 years. And of course, they were not going to listen to me. But I said, I am being forced to sign here, but I do not agree with this report. They said, all right, you can say what you like. So I went back to Indian Institute of Science, and then I went back to the field area. As I said, for some 4 or 5 years I had been doing field work, so I had a lot of friends there. And there was a very active Farmers Cooperative Society there, which was well organized. So I met those people and said, look, I mean, they are now going to pass a completely unjustifiable environmental impact assessment, and I have said that I will not agree to it. Can we undertake a people's environmental impact assessment? So they were said, of course we will undertake a people's environmental impact assessment if you and a few other technical people can guide what to do. And most of our sons and daughters are studying in a college in Sirsi. I am sure the college would give support. So I met the principal, one Mr. L.T. Sharma. He was very positive. So he created from amongst those local people who were going to be affected by submergence a team of young vigorous students, and then fortunately I had good contacts. There were some economists and engineers, engineers at Indian Institute of Science, very capable ones, and economists at Indian Institute of Management in Bengaluru. We prepared a report. Now when I started preparing the report, then I noticed that there was an excellent model already in existence, and that model was the report prepared by Professor M.K. Prasad, M.P. Parameshwaran, I think K.P. Kannan and V.K. Damodaran of KSSP, voluntarily prepared, and the report was on, please go away, sorry, you must allow eccentricities of old man, and when I am speaking, don't be here. So there was this report. I think it was called Environmental, Economic, Social and Technological Assessment of Silent Valley project. So Kuntipura River, a project was being planned, as you know, around that time, and KSSP had done this excellent job. They had brought together an interdisciplinary team. Prasad was, of course, a distinguished botanist, ecologist. MP Parameshwaran, who had just come from Atomic Energy Commission back to Kerala, who understood energy issues very well. V.K. Damodaran, who is an electrical engineer, and Kannan, an economist. And they had prepared this very good report. So I said, well, while we are doing our assessment of Bedki, I must get in touch with these people, and that is how I managed to acquire another one of my gurus, Professor M.K. Prasad, and we spent a lot of time together going over the report, and then came the whole questioning of Silent Valley project. So that will bring me to Kuntipura River here in Kerala, and then spend some time with them. In fact, in Thrissur, this very town, there was an annual meeting of Kerala Shastra Sahithya Parishad. So I remember staying here in some lodge on the periphery of that huge ground near the temple, and then there was an evening meeting of so-called People's Parliament discussing the Silent Valley. I think it was 1980 probably. And V.K. Damodaran, one of the authors of that report, was the president of KSSP that year. As I said, we all stayed together in that lodge, a lot of people sleeping on the ground. I was with them and participated in People's Parliament. It was quite a remarkable experience for me because there was a huge gathering. And of course, unfortunately, I don't know in Malayalam, but they were telling me what was going on, and there was very vigorous exchange between the people who were answering questions, which included, of course, all these four authors, a few others, and I was there. And I became really convinced and said that, you know, we must now look into this Silent Valley project a little more carefully. So it happened that that time Mrs. Indira Gandhi had been re-elected in 1980, and she set up a committee under the chairmanship of Professor M.G.K. Menon, who, as you know, hails from Kerala. He was a member of the Planning Commission that time. M.G.K. Menon, with 4 members nominated by the central government and 4 members nominated by the state government. And we started our investigations. So I thought the first thing one must figure out is why is this particular site Kuntipola river on the Silent Valley plateau being favored. After all, clearly there was substantial evidence that this was environmentally an important heritage and should not be disturbed as far as possible. So are there any really compelling reasons? Is this Kuntipola project going to produce such quantity of power at such low cost that that is the next project which the electricity board must push, or power corporation? Anyway, so I went to the power corporation office and I was a member of the official committee. They were very cooperative. I said, please show me. I mean, there surely are a number of alternatives for hydroelectric power generation. Do you have any kind of preliminary assessment, some ranking of which is a more desirable alternative, which is a less desirable alternative, and you have decided with proper analysis that no, Kuntipola, Silent Valley is the best of the choices. Well, they were completely taken aback. No, we never do such an analysis. We just go project by project. And we prepare, of course, the Bedti, by the way, I didn't tell the whole environmental impact assessment report which was presented was full of deliberately manipulated facts. So we prepare such deliberately manipulated filled project report. They did not say deliberately manipulated, but a project report which justifies the project, and we go ahead. I said, but isn't there some rational system after all? Some preliminary analysis can be done of all possible alternatives. Then people explained to me, it doesn't work like that, they said. There is some very influential contractor who has heavy equipment very close to the Silent Valley project site. So he is, of course, putting pressure to take up Silent Valley next, because then all his transport costs will be minimized. That's how the optimal choice is decided, not by any kind of other rational economic analysis. So this was quite revealing. Anyway, then the deliberation started and it was argued that the Mullaperiyar Shabarimala area was biologically vastly richer than this Silent Valley plateau. So there was nothing special about and no reason to say we should save Silent Valley. So what was the data? As I said, this was maybe 1981 or so. There was very little good satellite imagery available. Today, of course, you have abundant satellite imagery which one can use, but very little of such, and in general no information at all, either on Silent Valley or on this alternative, this Sabariwala Mullaperiyar area. That somebody must do field work. So I said, sure, I will go visit both the places and first hand collect whatever information is needed and report back to the committee. So they were happy and they said, fine, let us do that. So I was mandated to collect this information. There was a member appointed by state government. I think Stephen was his name. He was professor of zoology in some college. Now he thought, just to let me go by myself, and of course he felt that I would not be honest, like, no sir, but you need to be honest. I will give some report which was doctored, which would favor Silent Valley. He said, I will come. I said, certainly sir, it would be my privilege to have Professor Stephen along with me on this field work. So the Pamba River, I remember, we crossed and we were going to have to camp 2 nights in the forest before we reached, I think the place was called Elatheri, some such, on the crest line of the Western Ghats. Beyond that was Madurai area, I remember. Anyway, so 2 nights we will have to camp. At 3rd evening we might, hopefully properly walking, reach that crest line. That was the plan. And there were two local people from that area, villagers on the bank of Pamba river there. They said, we know the place, we will take you there. So we started. So I have another leech story. So as we started, then Stephen saw his leeches began to bite us. He said, this is horrible, what can we do? So those people told, no, you put some turmeric, or we'll give you some tobacco and you smear, and perhaps leeches won't bite, but we cannot guarantee. So he said, well, we must try. I said, hey, look, I've been doing fieldwork a long time. This doesn't quite work when it is so infested by leeches as it is here, but we can try. But we are scientists, so let us do a proper experiment. So on my right foot we will put all this, and left foot we will leave alone, and on your left foot you put all this and leave right foot alone, and let us walk for a kilometer and see whether the treated foot escapes leech bites. So we walked that 1 kilometer, whatever, in 15-20 minutes, and we checked. So all the four legs were equally covered. This was not working. Stephen said, I am not coming. So he went back, and I, along with those field guides, and actually one good friend of ours from Kerala, Satish Chandran Nair, two of us, and we went on, completed the trip. Anyway, we discovered many things. It was very clear. I also went to Silent Valley in the field. It was very clear that Silent Valley was indeed superior in several ways to this alternative, and there was every case to preserve it. We had further debates, and then the committee concluded, and Central Mrs. Indira Gandhi agreed to drop the project. There was then Silent Valley was constituted a national park. There was 25th anniversary of its constitution as a national park, which I attended, and it was very interesting. At that time, all parties had unanimously voted for having the project, and at the 25th anniversary, many prominent politicians came, including then Forest Minister, I think Binoy. And he made a speech. He said, we were wrong and it was right to drop the project, and I am very happy it is a national park today. And other politicians also made similar speeches. So this was, as I said, an experience worth remembering for a long time. And then, of course, as I said, the starting point was that there was this independent, impartial, careful assessment, technological, scientific, engineering perspective, ecological perspective by KSSP. And that clearly had played a critical role in initiating this debate and then taking it further. When the Western Ghat Ecology Expert Panel work commenced, then of course I learned and then went over. River Research Center had prepared perhaps by that time, of course, there were other possibilities. They had obtained river flow data, and they had done computer simulations of river flow and so on, and done a very good analysis of what was the state of that Athirappilli hydroelectric project. So as a committee, we went to Athirappilli, the spectacular waterfalls I saw. We also saw that that was the habitat of what is classified as one of the 30 or so particularly vulnerable tribal groups in the country, cadres, and by Forest Rights Act, their complete consent was essential before the project was going to be pushed, but it was being pushed without asking them anything. we had a meeting firstly with some panchayat members at Athirappilli and then a public meeting in the town hall at Athirappilli. The overwhelming feeling from people was that they simply don't want this project. It is going to do many things. It is going to probably substantially reduce the flow in the waterfall, which is important for attracting tourists, and tourism is very important for the economy of Athirappilli. The irrigation to the agriculture downstream of the dam would be affected, so they also did not want that to happen. And as I said, overwhelmingly they wanted the project to be dropped. Now we have in this country a 73rd amendment which says that the local bodies like panchayats have every right to be involved in decision makings on what should go on in our democracy, and that their decision must be given very substantial weight. And this had been underlined in the case of Plachimada, where there was a court case regarding the Plachimada's Coca-Cola factories both exhausting groundwater and polluting water resources, I think both surface and ground. And Plachimada Panchayat had objected. The Coca-Cola company had gone to court against this objection. In between, the Kerala legislature had woken up and appointed an inquiry committee which had estimated that the panchayat had lost 160 crores because of this Coca-Cola factory, and Coca-Cola factory should pay them this compensation. Then Coca-Cola went to Kerala legislature passed a unanimous resolution, I believe, asking that these should be compensated. And then the Coca-Cola company went to court. The High Court of Kerala ruled that the panchayat has the right to participate in the decision, and they have unanimously resolved that they don't want this factory, so it should not be allowed to continue. So it was all this was clear, and still, in spite of this overwhelming opposition from Athirappilli Panchayat, this was being pushed, as so many things are being pushed all over India. But interestingly enough, there is a question of whether Kerala is energy hungry and whether it is essential to produce this hydel energy. Now there several questions arise, but the primary question is, will it really generate the kind of electricity it might is supposed to claim to generate by the amount of water available in the river? The Kerala Power Corporation or Electricity Board, whoever had prepared the project document, had given estimates of how much water is available, and the River Research Center's careful work showed that nothing like that much water was available, much less water was available, so you will produce much less power than was being claimed, and indeed you will be spending huge amount of money to generate paltry amount of power. So maybe it is like spending 1 rupee to get back power worth 70 paisa or some such absurd thing. So it was not technically also justified project. In spite of that, as I said, we know that even today it is being pushed anyway. So we decided that we should have a proper discussion of all this. Then there was Kerala Biodiversity Board, of which Dr. Vijay had been chairman, and they had given substantial documentation of the biodiversity losses that would occur and why it should not go ahead, the project should not be gone ahead with. So I said, as a committee, we said that let us have a proper discussion at which River Research Center, Kerala Biodiversity Board people, the Kerala Electricity Board people and others concerned can participate. And in Chalkudi town we had this discussion. As I said, all these parties were present, including senior engineers of Kerala Electricity Board. So presentations were made raising objections to the project, and at the end of those presentations I invited Kerala Electricity Board engineers to kindly rebut if these objections are invalid. There are some problems with the way they have formulated these objections. Please rebut. And they kept absolutely quiet. They had no answer, essentially admitting that all the objections were valid. If there were grounds on which they could have rejected those objections, they would have said that. I said, all right, if you want to study this and send me by email your objections properly formulated, take your time, send me your objections. No emails, no such email ever came. It was very clear that the objections were very valid. We were doing a project which was justifiable on no grounds whatsoever. It was being pushed, I am afraid, by one logic and one logic alone. We are a democracy supposedly of people, by people, for people. Now Stiglitz, a distinguished economist from US, a Nobel Prize winner, says, well, US democracy is supposed to be that, but actually it is a democracy of not one person, one vote, but $1, one vote. So those who have billions of dollars have billions of votes, and they always swing American democracy. But anyway, in India I think the definition may be changed a little bit. It is not a government of people, by people, for people, but government of contractors, by contractors, for contractors. And this is operating in all fields, and you see evidences every day. Anyway, of course in the official report we wrote no such thing. In the official report we noted all the objective facts available and recommended this project should not be gone ahead with. And as you know, of course, the report was rejected, or whatever, cold storage, Kasturi Rangan, another committee came. To my mind, they did a perverse job. It is not that they watered down, they did a perverse job. Because in that report is a statement which says, how can local communities have any decision in any role in economic decisions? So if you are a farmer and the economic decision is for a mine to be operational, or a stone quarry to be operational next to your cottage with their blasting, your house is going to be shattered, you have no role in any such decision making. So this is entirely unconstitutional statement, and our, as I said, 73rd Amendment and much of our constitution clearly says that people must have the primary role in decision making. So to have a seasoned technocrat like Kasturi Rangan sign a report with such statements, I think is really astonishing anyway. And it is a perversion of democracy, so it's not a watering down of any report, it is a perversion of our constitution in some sense. Anyway, now the last phase of Chalkudi and of course Pamba and Periyar and so on, you have these unprecedented rain, no doubt unprecedented rains in July, August last year. And then there was these floods which again inflicted huge damage. When that happened, by end of August or so, people began to sit up and take notice that maybe we had said something which was relevant, and the issue kind of opened up again, and Ravi, who is here, and others had started looking into what is happening. They had in fact been, even much before all this, I think continually in fact over the years, they have been monitoring Chalkudi river flow and what is happening to Chalkudi River. They had clearly been pleading all along to have a people-centered, inclusive policy for managing the river basin, to get people involved in all this. And they had been doing their best despite the negative attitude of the both the politicians and the bureaucrats by and large. They had last year in July and so on seen that the dams were being filled up too early. After all, a proper principle I understand is that the dam reservoir should be full by end of monsoon. You should not fill it up too early. If it is getting filled up, and you know very well there are going to be substantial amount of rains in August, September, you should be releasing some water. Anyway, as our symposium title says, let the rivers flow is a very important principle. There's universal agreement that there must be environmental flows in the rivers, which is not being followed. Anyway, and they had pointed out that these reservoirs were being filled up too early. There was danger that suddenly there will be a lot of rain and suddenly a lot of water will be released, which would lead to serious negative consequences. Now the local communities also had been aware of this. I understand that amongst the panchayats and so on also many sarpanches, maybe members of panchayat or others had trying to persuade the government to release the water in some phased fashion. River Research Center had written specific letters to government officials, I think both minister, the collector and maybe the irrigation or whoever, the project authorities, that there is this problem. Please review your policy and begin releasing some water. Simply don't stock it up. There was no attention paid. And when finally the reservoirs were over full, so to say, the whole water or a lot of water was suddenly released, and that was responsible for these unprecedented floods. If water had been released in a gradual fashion, as is in fact the proper policy, the flood water level, this of course is technical issue, Ravi tells me should have been lower by 1.5 to 2 meters, and 1.5 to 2 meters in the coastal area is a huge area, so much less area would have come under flood water if this had been followed as they had been warning. Obviously there is, so to say, completely people unfriendly bureaucratic management of reservoir waters. Then undoubtedly many reservoirs have been constructed which, like Athirappilli, would be unjustified on several grounds. So you have too many reservoirs damming up waters of too many rivers on the Western Ghats with water being managed quite improperly, and this is a very serious issue. Firstly, there should be an honest assessment when a new reservoir is proposed to be built, not the kind of manipulated assessments or not the way in which Athirappilli is trying to be still pushed. It should be is completely unjustified, and then if genuinely justified projects exist, then the water management in the reservoirs should be transparent. All data should be available to the public. The public should participate. There should be some system of involving them in the management. So there was a whole lot of such suggestions. All of them were in our Western Ghat Ecology Expert Panel report also. So when people say, did you predict that on August 11th, 2018, there would be these floods? I said, of course not. I mean, these are complex issues and nobody can make any such predictions. but had your suggestions been followed, would the damage have been less? And I said definitely yes, because if that had been done, there was proper management involving in a transparent fashion local communities, then warnings like those of River Research Center would have been heeded, and there would not have been this level of floods, though there would have been some floods at all. So it is very clear that had our recommendations been followed, the damage from the floods would have been substantially reduced. I will stand by that statement. I think there are many lessons for the future. Basically that you have a bureaucratic political apparatus which is unfortunately pursuing goals which are not in the broader social interest. This is obviously clear again and again. Therefore, the only way to correct this situation is to make the whole process of development, both decision making and implementation, inclusive and involve people in such major way. And fortunately we are a democracy. We have, as I said, substantial constitutional provisions including 73rd, 74th Amendment and in fact many other acts like Biological Diversity Act, which allows people to be involved in monitoring. All those should be made operational, and people should take the lead in insisting that we shall be at the center of all this decision making and implementation, and would not allow an insensitive and unfortunately corrupt machinery to go on the way it is going on. Happy to be here, share these experiences about rivers, and once again pay my tribute to the memory of Latha, who was behind this remarkable scientific contribution to people-oriented and responsible environmental management. Thank you.